Let's kick it off at 6:32, call to order, meeting of the Montpelier-Roxbury Board of School Directors. Because we are doing this virtually, we do have to take roll of the board members. So since there's a lot more people on my screen than I'm used to, Jill.
Here.
Mara?
Here.
Andrew?
Here.
Ryan?
Here.
Bridget?
Here.
Jill again.
Jerry.
Jerry?
He's connecting to the audio right now.
Okay, I see Jerry. Jerry is connecting.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late.
There you go.
No worries. We have, so first order is public comment. We have a lot of members of the public. Can you all, the raise hand function?
Does everybody know where that is on Zoom? Give a thumbs up there.
If people want to speak, could you please either raise your hand or give the thumbs up? So
right now I see 4.
Which 4? It's not showing for me.
Mia, Beth, Joan, Amanda. Oh, Allison's raising her hands too. Both hands.
Okay, and who else?
Anybody? Oh, and Julia.
Mia, Beth, Joan, Amanda, Julia.
We have 5 there. Did we
Also,
miss
Carolyn.
Oh, sorry, Carolyn, I missed you. Yep.
And Abby now.
Okay, I'm seeing it now. Okay, so just so I have it right, I have Amanda, Beth, Joan, Carolyn, Mia, and Abby. Is that the list? Those are the 6 hands I'm seeing.
And Julia. Julia and Allison as well.
Okay, where are Julia and Allison? They're not showing up. I believe you.
They have their hands raised on screen rather than in the participants.
Okay. Julia, who's the first one? All right. And Allison. Okay. Yes. Okay. I'm seeing the hand. So why don't we go? Why don't we go in that order? Please try to keep your comments to a minute or less. So start with Mia, please. Remember to unmute yourself when you're talking and try to mute yourself when you are not talking to avoid background noise. So Mia?
Thanks, Jim. And thank you everyone for your attention. This is actually my first school board meeting, and I'm here to speak to the topic of the school resource officer item on the agenda. I just wanted to say very briefly that I don't think we need one, and I wanted to offer that this is an opportunity for us as a community to review why we thought we needed one in the first place, and see if there are possibly other ways that we could accomplish that purpose or those goals, especially knowing that the data shows that we don't actually have safer schools when we have police officers in schools, and if that is one of the goals, then what are the other ways that we can accomplish that? And depending on what the other goals are for having a school resource officer, and what can we think, and we come together as a community to think creatively and collaboratively about other ways that we can accomplish that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mia. Beth Blues.
Hi, everyone. Oh, sorry, we have some. Okay, here we go. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I actually wrote my thoughts down, and so I'm going to read you what I'm coming to this meeting to talk about, which is to oppose and ask that we remove school resource officers from our school district. I can also submit this in writing. It just wasn't clear to me how or where to do that, so I'd love some information at some point on how to follow up and submit it as well. So, this year, I'm RPS for school purposes. Most perception of police, whether in schools or in communities, depends upon their privilege. The impact of police and the harm they cause to black and brown bodies in this country that is well established for many years. The history of policing itself dates back to maintaining control over bodies, black bodies, following the end of the United States. Today, people across this country are outraged by police brutality and are demanding meaningful transformation to hold police accountable and invest in communities of purpose. The truth is, police brutality is not new. It's just being captured on video and exposed more often. People, including Vermont's top law enforcement officials, have said that those problems don't exist here, that Vermont is different, and so we should not let the actions of others in those other states drive our decisions here in Vermont. That claim is false, and the notion that Vermont is exceptional is offensive, particularly to Black and Brown community members who are disproportionately targeted by police here in Vermont. The evidence clearly demonstrates that police violence and use of force is as present in our communities as it is across the country. In Vermont today, Black motorists are stopped and searched at disproportionate rates. Our prisons have some of the worst racial disparities in the entire country. Images of police brutality appear regularly on video recordings, and the number of police killings is steadily increasing, all here in Vermont. What does this have to do with police in schools? Simply put, you cannot ignore the history of police in this country and state when discussing their presence in schools. This history does not suddenly disappear when that often white officer walks through the doors at Montpelier High School or any other school in this community. It does not disappear for the Black and brown kids who are told by their parents to put their hoodie down while walking outside at night, or to keep their hand visible when pulled over by police. It does not disappear for that 10-year-old Black girl who just a few weeks ago stood up and spoke at a Black Lives Matter rally in Waterbury, crying and shaking as she explained that white people were lucky to not know what it feels like to feel the fear of police. That for her, it was terrifying sitting in the back seat when just days before her parents were pulled over in Vermont by the police, knowing that with one wrong move, she could see her parents killed in front of her. This is real for people in Vermont, even if it's not real for you. Police do not make all communities feel safe, and schools are meant to be safe places for children. How can we possibly say that some of our students deserve to feel safe while others do not? At what cost? Now let's put that history aside for a minute and address the current arguments in support of police in schools. Two main claims made by proponents of increased policing are that school resource officers can control and prevent crime among students and prevent or thwart armed attacks on schools, like school shootings. However, the existing evidence for SROs increasing safety is mixed at best, with strong evidence of unintended harmful consequences that come with SRO programs, including thrusting students into the criminal justice system and perpetuating racial inequity. In other words, there is no meaningful evidence to suggest that police presence in schools helps to keep our students safe. And it is evidence we should be basing decisions on for this issue, not presumptions. Another major argument is that the presence of police officers in schools helps to establish a positive relationship with people in the community early on and can serve as a resource for students in and out of school, helping to be a bridge when law enforcement gets involved in an out-of-school family situation. Well, the question is for who? For which population of students does the SRO serve as a resource? Thinking back to the history of policing and police and its relationship with communities of color, especially the Black community, what evidence is there to support this claim when communities of color do not trust police because too often interaction with them result in harms to their body? It is a fallacy to say police and schools are good for building positive relationships and being a bridge in police interactions with families when the evidence and reality suggest otherwise. The fact is, when law enforcement is placed in a school, Black and brown students and students with disabilities are less safe. Some argue that it's okay for police to be in schools because they get additional training to know how to support kids. Yes, SROs get training on trauma-informed practices. Is it enough? No. Do they get as much as a trained social worker or a school counselor? No. If supporting kids and making them feel safe in our school is our goal with our SROs, then we can meet those goals far better with people more highly trained than a police officer who gets a few additional hours of trauma-informed practices, people like social workers and school counselors. At the end of the day, police are trained to respond to threats, and they are trained to respond with as much force as is necessary, according to them. We have seen time and again how inserting police into situations where a person is having a mental health crisis, for example, escalates the situation. Is that the response we want in our schools when children with brains that are yet to be fully developed are in the middle of a crisis? At Montpelier High School, where my children will go, 11.6% of the 293 students are students of color, according to 2015 data, which is the most recent available by the Civil Rights Office of the federal government. Of the 12 out-of-school suspensions in that year, 66.7% were Black students, but 4.4% of the student population was Black, indicating a severe disproportionate impact on Black students at the high school. This is what institutional racism looks like. This is how the school-to-prison pipeline begins. Additionally, 10.9% of the students at Montpelier High School are identified in the 2015 data as students with disabilities, IDAs, while 20 to 25% of students with disabilities received out-of-school suspensions that year. Half of in-school, out-of-school suspensions and referrals to law enforcement from Montpelier High School were for students with disabilities. This is unacceptable. The data makes clear that some of our children are not receiving the supports they need to be successful. The Montpelier-Roxbury School District should end the use of police in schools and instead provide funding for educational support services. What our kids need is more counselors, more support, and a stronger sense of belonging to this community, not more police. And so it is up to the 9 of you to decide, as our elected school board members, who are you going to invest in? Are you going to invest in the students of this community and listen to the voices of the families who are asking you to get armed police out of our schools? Or are you going to prioritize the voice of police and invest in them instead? For me, the decision is easy. I hope it's easy for you too.
Great, thanks, Julia. And I would apologize. I just noticed my camera has been off. I think that's everyone. Is there anyone else who wants to speak? Allison, sorry. Go ahead.
My name is Allison Maney, and I'm a resident of Montpelier, an educator in another school district. And I'm a mom of 2 Black kids who go to, one who goes to Montpelier High School and one who will go to Montpelier High School next year. And I have their permission to speak. I had hoped my daughter would be willing to speak, and she was earlier today, but then she just got too nervous. Both my kids have said that they think that the SRO has been very friendly in their school. They've had conversations with the SRO outside of school, and yet they're still very fearful. My daughter talks very eloquently about feeling terrified when she sees the police officer in the school. And both my kids don't necessarily feel like Montpelier is a very safe place for them, not just the school, but in general. There was a Black man that was shot in Montpelier. There was a man with mental health issues shot in Montpelier. And there was somebody, a young person shot on the, school behind Montpelier High School. All of these very specific local issues, moments in time, plus with the Black viral death that they're seeing on social media, is making this a really traumatizing time for them. And I'm worried about them going back to school. I'm worried about them being able to feel safe, follow the enforcement of new rules that COVID is going to be placing on them. And I'm worried that their lack of compliance, normal teenage lack of compliance, will be seen differently because they are so dark-skinned and outspoken, and not always super compliant like teenagers. And so I guess as a mom, I'm terrified. I'm really, and I know it's not just an issue of having an SRO in the school, but that is just one gesture that I feel like our school district can really be making right now, and making a big statement around that in support of my children and other people of color and people with disabilities in this community. And I would really, I also just want to say I'm very heartened to hear everybody who has spoken against SRO in school. It makes me feel much less alone, and that means a lot right now. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Allison. Anyone else?
Yes.
Thanks.
Jim, this is Lalita Mailwaganem.
Yeah. Can I,
Hello.
no, go ahead.
You wanna introduce
all right.
yourself?
Yeah, that's Lalita. I'm Corby. Both of us are parents of two mixed race children in the schools. One is entering the high school and one is in middle school. And I mean, in support of what everybody else has said, yes, I think having a social worker in the school would probably be a better use of the money than an SRO. My kids have, well, one of them has experienced racism that got kind of dismissed by the police when it was brought to their attention, and that was a very disappointing outcome. And since then, I think that the level of trust has lessened with both of my kids, with police officers. And I think it's important that we use, our limited finances better. And somebody called this a statement, and I think it's more than a statement. I think it's an approach that needs to happen in Montpelier. If we're going to be serious about addressing systemic racism, we need to make changes. And this is one of the first changes I believe we need to make. Lalita, is there anything you wanted to add?
So when my daughter went through that racism incident, when I said it is racism, the police officer, I'm sorry, it brings up a lot of stuff for me because I, as a person of color, have encountered a lot of racism. So to see my own kid going through was really very traumatic. So when that happened, I had to take her to the police station because the kid that was involved was not from Montpelier High School. It happened in our local library. So I had to take her to the police station a couple of times so we can talk to the officer. And this was really not only traumatic for me, but traumatic for my kid who was like 11 years old or 10. And she had to recount again what happened. She got called names. She got hit. There were bruises on her. And I would prefer a social worker, not a cop,
Absolutely.
to come and help us deal with the situation. Someone who has experience in mental health. Is that correct word? Yeah. So I'm just very disappointed when me or a person of color says this is racism and the police officer says just no and sweeps it under the carpet.
Right.
And it's, if you don't have the training, you cannot see what I see.
And even with the training, the minimal training in systemic racism that police have received or may receive, it won't be enough. It won't be anywhere near the level of training that a social worker who is trained specifically in racist issues would be able to, well, not just racist, but issues for children would be able to see. I just think our money is far better spent on somebody, a counselor who can help with the issues. If police are needed, they can be called, but I don't think police are needed full-time or even part-time inside the school.
And the other thing I remember is I was guilt tripped in not taking any action against that young kid because I was going to ruin his future if I were to take action. And I forgot the other one. Shoot. And if a social worker was involved, they would have told me this new information. So the following year, that same student from a different school who attacked my daughter enrolled in the same school again.
Enrolled in her school.
In her school again, in the middle school. So that was like a slap on my face because I was not told, my daughter was not told, and for her to see that perpetrator in the school was traumatic to her. And I had to tell her coach, tell her that just ignore him, don't go near him, if anything happens, let me know. So it's really disappointing to find out.
I think that's it.
Yeah, that's it. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Very eloquently stated and very helpful, I think, certainly to me, and I'm sure to the rest of the board as well. So I think I suggest that in the board discussion, we move the SRO to the top of the list, so that way we don't have people have to hang on through other discussions. So why don't we do the consent agenda, and then we can go to the SRO portion of the board discussion, just again, so folks don't have to listen to discussions are probably not taking time out of their Wednesday evening for. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Second. So we have to do roll call again. Jill?
Here.
It's aye. It's aye or nay.
Aye.
Unless you want to vote present. Mara?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Bridget,
Aye.
Jerry,
Aye.
and I don't think I missed anyone. Okay, so now we'll go to the board discussion portion, and let's start off with the SRO role, and then we'll do the other 4 items.
Jim, if I can just say, there's a comment in the chat, I think maybe from Bill, about did we possibly cut off public comment before it was done?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we?
It's Bill. I don't know how you normally do your business. I think I assume we could comment during the agenda item, but if we missed it,
no, I'm sorry if I overlooked you. I thought Letha was the last, but go ahead and we'll reopen. Just
sure. Well, I'll try to be brief. Thank you for having this. This is certainly a very difficult issue, as many of the people here involved are also talking to us about policing, and we take that very seriously. So my name is Bill Fraser. I am a 25-year resident of Montpelier. I have 4 kids that went all through Montpelier schools, from kindergarten to 12, all graduates, and had wonderful experiences. I'm also the city manager for the city, and as such, I oversee the police department. I would urge you, as you have this conversation, so I mean, obviously, I tend to favor this, but I also think it is important to listen to everybody's voices. I would urge you that as you consider this decision, you take a look at Montpelier-specific data. Our data, shows us that there is no history, at least in terms of police stops, police arrests that show a bias in Montpelier, but that should be proved. You shouldn't take my word for it. Take a look at cases like the suspensions and find out how many of those involved the SRO. I don't know the answer. Were those police-involved decisions, or was that something else? Because as somebody earlier said, and I guess I have to reinforce that I don't think that removing the SRO is going to change, is going to suddenly end racism in the city or in the schools. There are systems that are involved here. I would urge people to take a look at cases that were referred where there, the suggestion was made, people with special needs, that it shows a bias. Perhaps you should maybe look at each one. Or was it a safety situation? I'm aware of cases where students were throwing chairs around and were out of control, and there wasn't anyone in the building, able to handle that. So they called in the resource officer for assistance to get some safety and control for the students. So to make sure that we understand why those referrals were made and what those things happen. And to that end, I would urge that the staff and the teachers be consulted about the impact of this role, what kind of support they have. I think none of us endorse the idea of sort of the fully militarized police officer strolling the hallways, but I think that is not the goal or the system we've tried to have. But if there are problems that we'd like to hear, particularly Montpelier-specific problems. With regard to social workers, I don't pretend to be an expert on the school budget. I know for some period of time there was a social worker in schools. There's 3. So they do exist and are funded, and people that may or may not be aware, but the budget that starts today for the city includes funding for an embedded social worker in with the police department to handle these kind of calls. So we hear that, and an armed police officer isn't always the best person. I'd like to quickly address the shootings. Someone brought up the shootings, and I think, and I don't want to get into detail because it's sad and scary. There was a Black person shot, but it was not. The police were not involved in that. That was a crime, and a person has been convicted for that homicide. And because of the work of our police, that was not a police-involved shooting. And without going into great detail on the 2 police-involved shootings, in both cases, an hour plus was spent trying to de-escalate the situation. And in both cases, the individuals pointed guns at officers and threatened to kill them. And so the officers responded out of their own safety. We can like that or not, but those are the facts. Neither of those calls were initiated by the police seeking to pull someone over, and neither of those calls involved persons of color. So we are sensitive to the issues. I'd urge you all to get everyone, all of us, because I don't know the answers to some of these questions I've raised. I think it's incumbent on all of us to engage in a conversation get the information and see what has actually been happening in the Montpelier schools, what's been happening in the Montpelier community. Engage our new police chief, who I know is interested in talking about this. I believe he's here on the call, although I'm not going to volunteer him to speak unless he wants to. But that's my question. Do it thoughtfully, get the information, and make a decision based on what's right for our city, and make sure that we're doing the right thing for Montpelier.
Thank you, Bill, and apologies for not seeing you wanted to speak. Just before we totally cut off public comment and move on, is there anyone else who wants to speak before we adjourn? Either like
Yes. Just one last comment. Picking off of what Bill said, I recognize that sometimes police will be needed, but I wonder if that is something that can be done with a police call. And secondly, students throwing chairs or what have you. I work at the hospital. We talk people down, violent people down, all the time. I'm trained in that. I think that's something that doesn't necessarily have to be a police officer, and in fact, oftentimes it's best when it isn't. But that's my opinion. I just wanted to throw that out. Thank you.
great, thank you. And is there anyone, I don't want to cut anyone off. I also want to get into a broad debate because we do have to move on to the meeting. Is there anyone who has not spoken who would like to speak briefly?
Hello, good afternoon or good evening.
You're on deck, I believe, as well. You're on the main agenda.
Should I just hold off then?
Yeah, let's move to that, and we can have Libby kick off the SRO discussion, and I think she's got a slot for you to speak. So we're very, very interested and excited to hear from you, and welcome aboard, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Libby?
Yeah, we can actually don't go away there, Chief Peete. We'll jump in. The chief and I met yesterday, so I know that he wants to talk about this process. We also have Matt Nisley here, who is no longer our SRO, but Matt was I should say Detective Nisley, if I'm being professional. Detective Nisley was our SRO for the past 6 years. And so he's got a good history of the role of the SRO in schools. I want to thank everyone who came to the meeting. And I know I speak for the board when I say it's delightful, even though this is a very hard conversation. It's wonderful to see your faces and participate in the discussion. And so thank you for coming out and sharing your stories that are not easy to share in any way, shape, or form, particularly in a public forum. So I very much appreciate it. And I also invite you to make a session with me to talk to me about that, about your experiences in the schools. I know some of you pretty well, but I don't know all of you. And so I welcome anybody to come to make a meeting with me to talk through some of your concerns and things like that. So as I start my third year as superintendent of Montpelier-Roxbury Public Schools, the SRO position has been one that I quite honestly have relied on as a superintendent. I can't sugarcoat that at all. Matt, Detective Nisley, has been a resource for me as a superintendent, learning how to run a system with school safety at the heart. He also participates in every single meeting that we have as teams with our social workers and our administrators. He knows our kids. He knew our kids pretty well, and so when he was coming to support either administration or social workers or guidance counselors and teachers and students, he was doing it from a place of knowledge because that was his position he took. Detective Nisley can also share several stories of keeping kids out of the criminal justice system. And when I asked him for data around that piece from the 6 years he worked there and Matt, please correct me if I get any of this wrong. Only one student was brought to the criminal justice court system under his role as the SRO. And that's in 6 years. So it's not that he didn't have the opportunity for others potentially, but he was able to work in conjunction with Montpelier's excellent restorative justice center to work with kids and families to move in a different direction than the criminal justice court system. So with that collaboration with the restorative justice center, it's worked in the way that we'd like to. Now that doesn't belittle or demise or take away from the fact that what is happening across our nation and in our state is not right, and that there are several concerns that we have in making sure that all of our kids feel safe, particularly our kids of color, feel safe every single day and thrive in our school system. And it's not taking away from that, and it's not taking away from that desire. But I do want to state that the SRO position in my tenure here at Montpelier-Roxbury has been supportive of our students and has been supportive of our administration and our goals to protect and keep kids on the path we want them to be on. And I think that needs to be stated. But as I'd like to give Chief Peete a chance to take part in this discussion, and Officer Nisley, Detective Nisley, if he'd like to, just to state from their opinion as well. And again, I appreciate everybody who's come out tonight. Absolutely. So Chief Peete, would you like to take the floor?
Hello and good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And I just want to say this is a very personal topic for me. That we cannot discount. And I encourage the school board to not discount the emotions, the fear, the anger and the experiences that some people have dealt with regarding past incidences with the police. Those are real. And so I'm very encouraged and grateful for this dialogue. But I also need to say that that we all should be involved in this conversation to talk about these things and to make the decisions based on what has happened here in Montpelier and not in the actions that happened in Minneapolis. And so if I may share a story, my father was working within the Chicago public school system. I am a Black man, born and raised on the city's south side. My experiences with police officers have been mixed. My experiences with SROs have been mixed. And I see the comment. Yes, that's what I'm saying. It is not about Minneapolis. It's about Vermont. It's about how the police department in Vermont is dealing with the issues and how we can become community partners and try to find a way past what's been going on systemically and within our institution. So I just say that I think the many levels that you have, the many opportunities, it's incumbent upon us to try to put as many people who care and who want to make a positive difference. And yes, police officers do care. We do want to make positive differences. We want to be there to help our communities. And the more people that you have that are able to see something and to slip and to keep someone from slipping through the cracks, because we're all doing more with less. Staff is doing more with less. Social workers are doing more with less. Counselors, teachers. But it's just another set of eyes to help someone in need. The Montpelier Police Department is not here we have flaws, we have mistakes, and we're working towards things, but we're not here to be a symbol of institutional racism. That's the last thing I would ever want to be a part of. So I think that this conversation warrants a look and a discussion of it's how the schools use the SRO. We should not, we don't need officers there. It's going to escalate a situation where an officer may not be able to relate or to develop a sense of trust with students, with our children. And my daughter's going to school there as well. So I've seen my father pull people out of really bad situations, and he did it without sending them to jail. He did it with partnering with other teachers and staff members and saying, hey, I think this is going on. And yes, we may not have the training or the education that a social worker does, but we have training and education and life experiences to understand when we see someone who is struggling in life and having problems, that we can de-escalate any situations to crises and move them to the people that do that work. We're not claiming to be social workers. We don't want to be able to stop a walking around. It's not about safety. Montpelier has different challenges and needs than other places, and we need to make sure that we address those challenges and needs and we respond to them. So I just say that there is a national conversation. This is the scripted part, but there's a national conversation to be had, and we're having it now. It's great, regarding the roles of police officers in the schools. But Montpelier has been doing this right for a long time. This is the first time we're addressing this issue. This hasn't been something that each school board meeting you've been having to talk about complaints with SROs. I think that for all of us to come to a place that we're comfortable with each other, we all have to be involved in a dialogue, and we all have to understand that a lot of arguments are like, it's not about one individual person. Then what is it about? We have to love each other. We have to tolerate each other. We have to understand where each other's coming from. We have to figure out what our department needs to do to right the wrongs of what's been going on institutionally wise. So I would just ask, in making your decision about the SRO program, that you judge our department based on the relationship that we've had with our community and the merit of the things that we've accomplished, and not about the challenges that other locations may have. So I really am hoping for the opportunity to speak with you guys more in depth. I understand if you have to make that decision now, but I'm also hoping to continue this dialogue regardless of what happens here. But I want to continue the dialogue with people here who have been affected and who have everyone's concern here is legitimate. But we have to talk through them. We have to talk about it. We have to figure out where to go. And so I would just ask for that, those opportunities to be heard and judged on our personal merits. So thank you all very much for this.
Thank you, Chief. Are you okay taking questions from the board if they have any about?
Yes,
Pat first, and then.
Yes, I am.
Any questions for the chief before I hear from Officer Nisley or Detective Nisley? Matt? Go ahead.
Oh, that hurts.
They may come later.
Hey there. And Matt is fine. 6 years being with the kids for me was an honor and a definite privilege to be part of that community. I learned more from being part of that community and working with educators and social workers than probably ever in my career. Just a couple of quick stories, and I see some comments. It's not about me. I agree with you. This is a conversation we need to be having. What I will say is, when we talk about school safety, the scariest time I had as a resource officer was sitting in Mike McGrath's office when we were talking about getting the Black Lives Matter flag up and making sure that those kids were safe, with the amount of national outcry and just hate and violence that was being targeted at our school and our community. was the scariest time I've ever had as a police officer to make sure that those kids were safe and that all of our kids were safe in the school during that. And I took that very seriously and very personally when those threats came in. And I lost a lot of sleep over that. And it was about that, keeping that whole community of kids safe and thinking about them being outside and the amount of threats and the amount of national threats that were going on. We had a lot of hours of planning to make that a safe event, and thankfully we did. You know, the other thing I will say is, and Libby brought this up, you know, one arrest in the 6 years that actually went to traditional court. That takes work and takes relationships to make that happen. And knowing the kids in the school and being able to point them in the direction of resources to keep them out of the court system is what the position is all about. Strong partnership with the Community Justice Center, with social workers at school, with, you know, family court when needed, and having that knowledge of the kids to know what we can do to help in that partnership with parents and community members was so important in getting kids through to graduation. You know, there were certainly times when cases could have gone to traditional criminal justice system. And, you know, because of that relationship and that knowledge of what kids were going through, I was able to point those kids in other directions, which helped them be successful and get through to graduation, which is, you know, what serves us best as a system is getting kids through to graduation in a happy, healthy way. I'm happy to answer any questions about what our program has been. And certainly I don't discount anyone here speaking of personal experience.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Officer Nisley?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Mara.
Yeah.
You go first.
So my quick question on the Black Lives Matter piece was, could Montpelier Police Department have been called and contracted with or consulted or otherwise used for protective purposes during the puppy dog during the Black Lives Matter national incident without having a uniformed armed officer in school daily?
Sure, I can answer that, or I'm sure Brian could as well. If you call us, we are coming. There is no doubt about that. We are here for our community, no matter what the role is that we inhibit. I think the difference was being able to be there with those students and part of those discussions on a daily basis with as the threats were rolling in and as things were happening. Gave an entirely different perspective than someone getting called into an hour meeting or whatever than we would have had.
Is that something you imagine that the school district could have done on a long-term basis anyway, though? Like, as they noticed threats of a larger scale coming in, could they have initiated an interaction with the police department and then had multiple interactions as the situation developed? And would that have served the same purpose? Yeah, I'm just trying to, because obviously we don't have a national incident every day. Right. So in the event that we would have another mass big incident like that, are there other ways to engage in protections that still fulfill the purposes of making sure the kids are safe without having an armed, uniformed person in the hallways daily?
Matt, maybe can I jump in?
If I'm
Mara, one of the things, I wasn't here obviously for the Black Lives Matter because that was before I was superintendent. But if I were to put myself in in Brian's shoes at that time, or Mike's shoes at that time, I would think one of the big differences, and Matt, correct me on this, is the relationship. So we've had other safety events after that in my realm, right? Being able to text Matt because I know him and we've built a relationship and I know he knows our schools as well as he does is very different from me calling a random police officer and saying, hey, we need some help here. And I know when I call Matt and say, I need to talk to you about this, then I know I'm taken seriously and I know that it's going to, like, we're going to be able to, I'm going to be very honest and vulnerable around what I'm going to say because we've built that relationship together. I don't have a relationship with Diane yet because I don't know her very well. She hasn't joined yet, but that for me as an administrator, yes, the school district probably could have collaborated with the Montpelier Police Department during the Black Lives Matter flag and ensured that our kids were safe and ensured that we had the process in place. I have no doubt about it, knowing Montpelier Police Department, right, and knowing the administrators in our school buildings, that would have been their number one priority at that moment. The relationship in that particular with something as intense as that, or like the potential school shooter that was at the tax department when was that, fall, when I could just text Matt and say, or Matt actually texted me and said, lock your schools down now, right? There's that relationship there that I don't question it, it just does. It's a piece. Is it a major piece? Could we get around it? Probably. However, it's a piece that's important to put out.
And if I may also add, I think that what we are is we're here. We're on the side. We're on everyone's side, and we want that opportunity to gain the trust of the people here, of the students especially. And I think that if they do understand, they see officers and they're able to understand that officers are human and that we can interact with children, with kids, with our students. Then when times like these happen, God forbid they ever have to happen again, but should they have to happen, that they know that we're here and we want to make sure that they're safe. So I just would think that we should have the conversation about how SROs should fit into the plan, should fit into school safety or involvement. When we see something, definitely we should have that plan. But I think that this is an opportunity to add another layer of someone who can identify someone who's struggling with something, and then move forward.
Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Detective. Thanks, everyone who has contributed this evening. As a board, I'm sitting here. Obviously, our role in this is we establish policies, we work on the budget, we negotiate a contract with the teachers union. But obviously, our superintendent is held accountable to us, and we are the representatives of our community with regard to the direction of our public schools. And so we are getting into some nitty gritty here that we normally don't, but this is a big enough and important enough conversation that I think it does warrant it from the board. I don't think we can just sit on the sidelines and say, administration, we're just going to let you go with this. I think it's important for us to be part of this conversation. And, anecdotes are one part of that, and I'm hearing a lot of anecdotes, but I'm really curious to know, as an employer, as a community trustee of one of our most important institutions, do we have clearly defined responsibilities for this position? Do we have a clearly defined purpose for this position? Do we have job specifications? I don't know the answer to that. Libby, maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, is it formalized on paper from our end? No, it could be at the police department. But as far as our job descriptions, because they're not technically our employee, they're the Montpelier Police Department employees. So the job description piece, if that's what you're going after, Andrew, would be at the police department.
Because I think for our schools, if we're going to have a police officer in our school, we need to have a conversation and we need to clearly establish
what is the role of this SRO at our school? What do they do? What do we want them to do? Should this person be the one that does this work, or might it be better suited to some other type of professional? That's the type of conversation that I've been hearing from community members, and I've been hearing from a lot of community members across a broad range of backgrounds on this issue. And I think we owe it to the community to have this conversation and to flesh these details out.
Yeah, we can talk. Matt and I both and Chief Peete can talk about exactly what the role is currently for the SRO. So I'll start listing. Matt, jump in. Chief Peete, jump in whenever I've missed one. So the SRO currently is collaboration with the school safety team or the district safety team, as well as each school-based safety team. So that's for crisis situations. It's for any kind of school safety event. They play a huge role in training our staff for those situations, which are mandated by the state, as well as helping us wade through lots of different opinions as to how school safety should be run. They also are a big part of that collaboration, so that should the awful event happen or tragic event happen in a school, then they are there to respond. They know our buildings really well. They know what our processes are. They know what our response is, so that nobody's guessing each other. We've collaborated to make those plans together. In addition, whenever there's a threat made against our school and schools in any way, shape, or form, the SRO is the one who goes and does a threat assessment. So it could be going to a student home or a family's home or a community member's home, whoever made the threat, to do an assessment to say, is this a threat that is something that needs to be followed through on, or is this not necessarily one that could be reality? I'm not sure how you would reframe that in a different way. Our SRO also helps when kids are highly dysregulated at times during the school day, when it gets beyond what our school building's capacity is. And it usually involves whatever's happening in the hallways or things like that. Rarely happens inside a classroom, but it's more a student is left in some way or run out of the building in some way. Often it could be we've lost a kid, and not we, but in terms of the kid has run away, and the SRO is helping with the family and other police is the connection between the school, the family, and community officers to help us find that kid and keep that kiddo safe. The SRO is also part of all of our weekly meetings with administration, guidance counselors, and social workers. There are liaisons to the Restorative Justice Center, certainly to make sure that we have that collaboration in place with the Restorative Justice Center. The SRO also works closely with our social workers if they need to make a home visit to a home that has some challenges going on with safety for our staff and our social worker. In that situation, the SRO will accompany the social worker, so the social worker can do their job with mental health and feel safe while doing it. Matt, what am I missing here?
It's a pretty good list. I mean, I think one of the other things that we haven't touched on is just the collaboration with the social workers on truancy issues and helping get to school and through graduation. Going out to do home visits day after day to try to get kids to just show up, and that's that isn't just a police officer going to the door. That's going with the social workers to the door to figure out what's the impediment, what's stopping those kids from getting to school. And certainly at times that also involved referrals to the Community Justice Center, who did phenomenal work with a few of our students, getting them through all the way to graduation recently, from 0 attendance 3 years ago. So it's those community partnerships that are so important.
The other piece, one last thing, sorry, Chief Peete, one last thing that I know that Matt has certainly helped us with is that people try to get into our district. And so Matt is the detective who will go look to see if they actually live within our boundaries and have somebody just as a small piece, but it's also a piece. Go ahead. Sorry, Chief Peete, go for it.
No, ma'am, it's okay. I just, if I can add that I want to make it clear that we're not advocating to replace social workers or counselors. We're not advocating to do that position. We're just another resource that can be there. We just want to, and if I can, I'll just go off based on what it is that our police department, our creed, and we look to the 21st century policing practices and models, and there's 3 of them. So basically, SROs must create, and I'm just quoting it so I don't get it wrong, that we're creating opportunities in schools and communities for positive non-enforcement interactions with police. We establish memorandums of agreement for a place of school resource officers that limit police involvement in student discipline, and that we have to try to restore and build trust between youth and police by creating programs and projects for positive, consistent, and persistent interaction between youth and police. And we'll never have that opportunity to have those interactions unless we can be allowed to be on school campuses and to have those interactions, because that's what we're trying to do, is foster and to improve of relationships, and to be there to have that national dialogue, that if someone who can come up to a police officer and say, why are you guys racist, or why is this happening within our communities, that officer can be there to have that conversation, and that officer can be there for that student to vent and to hear and to understand, and we can learn in turn with that. So I just what we follow as we come into as we proceed, hopefully, with our SRO program.
So I get Jim, can I clarify, we aren't making a decision tonight necessarily?
No, we are simply getting educated on the position. Yeah, go ahead, Mara.
Yeah. So I feel like it bears further discussion. Like what do we need done in the schools? Who is best to do them? And I don't know how we go about looking at something like that. I know I'm new to the board, so I don't know what the role of the board is and what the role of the board isn't. But I'm mainly interested for the purposes of, kind of leading and caretaking schools in knowing, like, what are the things that need to be done and what are the ways they could be done, and are they being done in the best way now? And that sounds like a really big question. And so I'm kind of tossing that over to Libby too. Those are my big questions, and they seem bigger than, they seem like you'd have to do some digging.
Yeah. No, I think those are the questions that we want to look into. Also, Libby, I understand the SRO is a city employee, not a district employee, but what's the actual document that governs the relationship? For instance, the SRO attends, certain meetings. Is that just a practice that's developed, or is there like an MOA between the city and the district that defines the role and responsibilities kind of as per the relationship?
If there is one, I've never seen it.
Yeah.
So I've never signed something yearly or something like that. So if there is one, then it's out of date, and we don't have one that's updated. Matt, you might be able to tell something different there.
Yeah, what I can say is it's Mark Moody started a very long time ago doing this and built the program, and I came in, was trained by him, and took over those roles and responsibilities, and they have been over the years modified to fit what works best for the school district and the students. But as far as a new written document, I have not been involved in creating an MOU.
And Matt and Brian, is there something at MPD that's the written down description of what the relationship and role are supposed to be?
We have internal expectations. I have to I just started as well, so I need to double check and to make sure that what we have, but just to make sure that we have those things codified in writing. But the best practice is for this conversation especially warrants it. That we need to make sure that within any policies that we have on our end, because we give our expectations to our SROs. This is what we expect you to do. But we need to make sure that we codify all of those in writings and memorandums of agreement, that we're not overstepping, or we're not coming in to create an environment of fear, of distrust. We need to make sure that anything that's outlined within an MOA is the will of the superintendent of Libby and the will of the board. And that's what we're here for. We're here to looking to be partners, to try to figure out different ways as best as we possibly can. Any opportunity that we have to extend safety to our students, we want to be a part of it.
Great, thank you. Do any of the board members have questions for Ron?
Can I just add one comment quickly, if I may?
It's a little out of turn. Is this something you could send us in writing? I just don't want to. If I open it up to you, I feel I have to open it up to everyone.
Well, it was actually okay.
All right.
I'll tell you something.
Sorry, Bill.
It wasn't an advocacy position, but
no, it's yeah, you can put in the chat if it's a quick piece of information. I think everyone can see it. But any board members who have further questions for Bridget?
Yeah, and I also want to echo what other board members have said in thanking everyone that has come here to our virtual meeting tonight and spoken. Thank you. I would like to hear a little bit more about the day-to-day experience of having a school resource officer in the high school, and is it only the high school? And there have been a lot of references to having an armed police officer. I assume as an officer he's carrying a weapon, but I don't actually know what uniforms, police cars, like what does it look like? I'd like to hear more about that if that's possible tonight.
If I may, I'm sorry. I spoke to Libby earlier again yesterday, and we talked about what this should continue to look like. So we want to make sure that it's a soft appearance. We don't want to have we're looking at not using marked cars. We're looking at using unmarked cars. We're looking at SROs dressing the same way. Unfortunately, we would, as much as I would love to not have to carry weapons, we are a smaller department. So in the event that an emergency happens, we're going to, and the SRO needs to respond, we're going to need her to respond as soon as possible. So we would prefer to make sure our officers stay armed. But that doesn't mean that they can't walk through the halls concealed. That doesn't mean that any weapons have to be, visible to the students. So we just want to make sure it's a soft approach, and that officers are interacting, not sitting in offices, that they have not been. Matt has not been doing that, but just going around and talking to kids and just working on gaining trust. And whatever it is that the board determines that thinks that this is going to be the best way for us to interact and to gain that trust, that would be part of an MOA. What your vision would be.
From my perspective, Bridget, sometimes I wouldn't see the SRO for many weeks. Sometimes I'd see them daily. Sometimes Matt would make several visits a day into my office to tell me about a situation that he was working on in terms of a threat assessment or something. The SRO is always a part of our district-wide safety committee that meets monthly, and always a part of the school-based safety committees that meet pretty much monthly. So I'd work with the SRO during that time and look to them for their expertise in safety then. Other times, Matt would be coming in to see if I needed something, see if something was going on. He'd be talking to me about situations that were happening outside of the community that I might need to be aware of. So from my perspective, sometimes it was a lot, sometimes it wasn't. Principals would have a probably different answer for you than I do as a superintendent. But we don't have any of our principals on here tonight. We can certainly invite them the next time we talk about this. So you get a different point. You're asked about the different school buildings. So Matt, or the SRO position is based in the high school, certainly is at the middle school often, and occasionally works with Ryan at the elementary school. And usually that's an on-call piece. Ryan will call if he needs support with something. And that's very atypical. but it has happened. Matt, you want to add anything to that? Roxbury's out of Montpelier Police Department's jurisdiction.
So they don't have any support if something happens there?
Yeah, so what my police, well, I actually should let the police department answer that question. Go ahead, Matt, sorry.
So I'll speak to that. Certainly I was involved in planning with Roxbury and any kind of consult that I could be part of. I would work with them on that, but just the logistics of being that far away, their emergency response is going to be state police at Northfield. Just for geographics. So, but yeah, the only brick and mortar office I had was at the high school. So everything else was pop-in visits and interacting with students when we could, or when we were invited by teachers, or when something was needed.
Thanks to all three of you. I appreciate all those responses.
Any other questions from the board? Ryan?
I get a question then, Libby. We did hear a couple anecdotes of some of our students in tonight's discussion, which was great to hear. But I'm curious, do we have any data? Are there any graduate surveys? Are there any ways we would have any data to be able to get a sense for how our students are reacting to the presence of the SRO in the building? The reason I ask is, last year when we worked with RJA, the Racial Justice Alliance, as a policy committee working on the DEI, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion policy, the SRO didn't come up in our discussions. It's not really in that policy. It might have just been overlooked by the students or the policy committee, but I don't remember those conversations we had with our students really raising the SRO as being a big problem in our buildings. So I'm just trying to understand what avenues we might have or data sources to help us inform what our students are feeling inside our building, or buildings, excuse me.
We don't have we don't have any data to show you right now, Ryan, around from students specifically, from Student Voice. We could show you up-to-date data around suspensions or, and that kind of thing. But we don't have like Student Voice qualitative data, but we can certainly try to get it. It's hard to get that kind of information now, but we can do our best.
Yeah, thank you.
And Ryan,
that didn't come up during the policy conversation with the students. You're right.
If we are thinking about doing some sort of listening or data collection, I do want to raise that the people who are disproportionately impacted are the people who will be least numerically represented. So it is really important for me to say over and over again, students with disabilities, LGBTQ students, Black and Brown students are disproportionately impacted. They are differently impacted in terms of trauma experiences, and their voices will be drowned out by, by experiences that aren't the same as theirs. So I think if we go into looking for data, I think it's important to note that this evening we've heard from parent after parent after parent who raises youth of color in our schools that they do feel threatened and they do feel unsafe. And that I think that has bearing to me to just listen to with weight, that the people who are disproportionately impacted are saying loud and clear that they are disproportionately impacted. And if we go into some sort of data digging, I would want us to think about how we would weight the experiences of people who are yet again likely to be disproportionately impacted.
Right. You're absolutely right, Mara. I didn't mean to dismiss anybody's experiences, but it was when I personally had a chance to sit down with some of our students and we had these conversations, the SRO just didn't come up. So I was just exploring what might be available to us.
Jim, I have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Jerry.
I'm just wondering if we have any information on if we have any risk assessments or anything like that in terms of, because I know a lot of times what you prevent doesn't always get good press. So in terms of having the officer there in the first place, what is the risk, and have we done any work on the risk should fit the position. So if there's less risk, then it would be less risk for us to move that to some other skill set. So maybe a social worker could do that, but is there a risk there that we are not privy to at the moment? That would be my question, is do we have any information on that?
So Jerry, when you're asking about risk, are you asking about the number of threat assessments, the number of caseload, like kids who are directly impacted?
Yeah, like what would happen? So right now, some of that is maybe de-escalated in quiet ways by relationships and trust and that kind of thing, or the officer going to the student's home. But what are we preventing by having the officer? Do we have any information on that? Just what kind of situations could it become? Because we don't want the unintended consequence of increasing risk, and that could be anything. That could be more truancy, that could be kids because of that getting into more trouble, and so on and so forth, all the way to the worst possible scenario. So I just want to understand the risk better.
Yeah, it might be certainly hard to quantify, although we could bring some numbers. It would be more qualitative information and based on assumptions and national data that may not match our local data. I'd have to think about, you'd have to think about as a board, like getting more specifics that you want me to dig into, and I'm certainly happy to do that. I would just need some direction so that I'm telling the story that you need to hear to answer that question, because I think it's a good one. I think it's a really good one, Jerry. It's just I'd have to really think about with you all how to get that information.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of thinking, and I know that we're at 8:00 and probably should move on. I'm kind of thinking next step, I think we need to kind of revisit this conversation, but it would be great to get, I think, a better sense of the need in a little more of kind of a written narrative form. Any data we have around the position, I think some sort of job description, so we can really, see what the formalized relationship is, and if there isn't a formalized relationship, what one would look like, or at least what the informal one looks like, and how it might be formalized. And then really try to build in a way to make sure that we're giving the weight that's due to the stories we've heard tonight, because I totally agree with Mara that the people who are most disproportionately impacted in a negative way, perhaps by this role, even if the overall feeling is a positive one, are the harder ones to have heard, and making sure that we're hearing them and accounting for them, and whatever decision we make going forward, or however the role is shaped. Does that make sense to folks?
I think, Jim, I think you and I would really want to talk about what it is exactly.
Yeah.
We could just problem solve that together.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think there's a hunger for a little more information about what kind of the real definition of this position is, what the relationship is with other resources. I mean, we do have social workers and we do have counselors, and they are, I think, an important part of this equation. Knowing how all these pieces interact, I think, would be very helpful, because I think there's some misperceptions around that. I think just getting a better sense would be useful. Jill?
Thank you. I just really quickly, I'm humbled as always to be on this board and participate in conversations like this. I certainly don't have some sort of prepared statement, but I want to say how I think one of the things I'm taking away from this evening is there's actually a lot more to unpack here, and a knee-jerk decision one way or the other is not really going to get at the problems. We can make decisions and then the problems will remain. I'm actually really, I wanted to point out, the school resource officer certainly isn't the person in charge of discipline and expulsions and things like that. So that's something we should talk about as far as what that data tells us about decisions at the administrative level. And also, I've always thought it's funny that in Montpelier we never talk about the youth risk behavior survey. When I worked at the Agency of Ed, we spent a lot of time unpacking that. There's some pretty serious data in there that as a community we should spend some time reviewing. So
we're waiting for getting that. That was a board agenda item this year. All we have is the state data. We still don't have the specific data. That's why I shared it with you.
My point was just that I'm so impressed and humbled by the voices that are here tonight. And I think it's pretty obvious that we all want the same things and we all can start to see the needs. And I certainly don't pretend to know all the needs. But that the harder work is really getting at the root of the problems and then what are we going to need to try to address them. And I think that's going to take a lot of work and I'm here for it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jill. Well, Libby and I will kind of discuss what this next conversation looks like and try to get, I think, more data on the bigger picture that the SRO fits into. And we certainly want more community feedback as we do that. So we'll think of a way to get both more community feedback and more student feedback too, which I think would be helpful.
And staff feedback.
And staff feedback. No, I think that's important as well. And also, I think good point, Jill, bringing in and Jerry bringing in some of the risks that we're looking to address. Okay. Well, I do want to thank everyone for just a wonderful conversation. I know these are hard issues. But I really appreciate members of the public taking the time to share their stories and to share their perspectives, some of which can be hard to do in a public space, hard to do in a private space often. So we really appreciate the involvement, and we will continue this discussion. It's definitely something we want to get right and take the time to do that. So thanks again, and the next item on our kind of slightly rearranged board agenda is board training needs for 2021. The two main ones, for context, that we have done in the past have been around communications and diversity, equity, inclusion issues, and the board's role in both of those. I think those are continuing topics that we can always, especially the diversity issues, that we can always use more information on and delve deeper into. And with a bunch of new board members, communications is very tricky, and just things like complying with the open meeting laws and use of social media, et cetera. I think it's great to have those, and I know we've talked about them somewhat. So those are the two that come to mind. But I'd love to just open it up and we can get some ideas, and then Libby and I can start to, when we put together the board agendas looking out, carve out some time for those to meet those needs. So I'll just open it up for ideas on trainings.
Jim, I second. I definitely second the need. I think we all recognize the need after our last training for more trainings on issues surrounding equity, diversity, inclusion. Since I've been on the board, we've had at least 2 of those, and that's a subject that's right for our attention, especially with our equity policy. But in communications, I think there's always value to that, especially figuring out how to bring community members deeper into the conversation and how to ensure that in this 21st century we're not violating an open meeting law, which is really well intended, but it hasn't fully caught up with the times. I feel, but so that's always a tricky needle to thread. But another issue, in addition to those, that I think would be helpful is we're going to be looking at some really, I have a feeling, difficult financial decisions over the next year or two. And I think it would be helpful for the board to better understand where the money comes from, how ed funding works. I mean, we get this in the budget once a year, and I know some of us, Jill, myself, and you having been on the board for a while, are better versed, and everybody has a little bit of an idea who's on the board. But I think that's something that can help everybody, and especially help facilitate conversations so that we all understand what's going on in this really difficult financial climate that we're looking at over the next year or two.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, and I think that'll not only educate us all, but as we enter what might be some difficult state level policy decisions, knowing how to intelligently engage those, knowing what's at stake, I think that the training like that would all help us with that. Any other suggestions? Brian?
Jim, I'm not sure I would propose it as a full training, but it did come up in one of our last policy committee meetings that I don't believe the board has had a discussion about policy governance or governance by policy, since we've had several new board members come on. And thinking about our conversation with the community this evening and hearing everybody in action and non-action, and I think it would be worthwhile to have a broad discussion about how we govern as a board and how we make decisions and how we take community impact and make that happen in the district. So I think that would probably be something on our radar, at least for a general overview, if not a full training.
Yeah, no, that's a good suggestion as well. Others? I think those four give us a pretty good slate. Okay, well, thank you for those. We will, Libby and I will look into that. Next is got to be a real crowd pleaser. Review of committee assignments negotiations. And let me first start this off by thanking Ryan, Bridget, Andrew for really working tirelessly over the last several months. And really, yeah, I think for all three of you over the last couple of years, and Bridget, I think even longer than that, to get us to a great place with negotiations this year and in years past. I know that is a ton of work. I know it is often feels pretty thankless. So I really want to thank you for stepping out and doing the tough work on that. That's super important to the district. It's hard and it's intensive and it can be draining on many levels. So we really appreciate all you've done over the last several years and over the spring to do that work. So thank you for that. That said, I think it's time, and I know we've got a couple of members who aren't able to make it tonight, to give the folks who want a break. And we don't have to make a decision tonight, but if anybody wants to step forward to be part of the negotiations team, we are certainly looking for new volunteers. And if you want to wait until we can talk to Emma and Aniket, we can do that as well. But I think if anyone steps forward, they probably will not be stepping on toes.
Well, Jim, I will say something that we've talked with Pietro about a little bit is that we have pretty much the smallest negotiating team he's seen. Okay. Yeah. And I'm willing to do it, but I do think it would be helpful to have at least, I don't know how Ryan's feeling. He might be pretty stretched right now. I'd be willing to do it again, but I really would like another person or two. And if Ryan were going to step down, then it would be two. But if Ryan were still going to do it, I think it would be helpful to have a third person because you can share the load a little better that way.
Andrew, you'd be willing? We could twist your arm to do it again. You love negotiations.
I don't love negotiations. It's very time consuming. I don't love that part.
No, but you're good in that meeting.
Andrew, do you mean that you think it's helpful to have 3 people for each contract, like 3 people in the room?
I think for the NEA one, I can't speak to the other contracts, but for the NEA one, you know, it's Ryan and me. If there were a third person, it's not having them in the room so much, but every once in a while, somebody can't make a meeting. It would give us a little more flexibility. It would also, if, for example, we were looking to draft some language or look into, you know, a financial trend that we wanted to bring to the table and discuss, it would just allow us to do that. I also think it can be helpful. You know, we come to the board and say, we're representing the board when we're negotiating, right? And I think it can be helpful to have a little bit more of the board there so that we feel a little bit more like, you know, this is the voice of the board and not just the voice of Andrew and Ryan.
Yeah.
That all makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think having 3 people for the teachers union makes sense. I'm not sure that every contract needs 3 people.
Yeah, it's just for the teachers. That's the one I was thinking. And I'm not volunteering for the other ones.
Right. But I just wanted to make the point that if we need 3 people on the teachers and we have 2 other units, we really need more like 4 or 5 people.
Right. Because we do have 1-year contracts for all 3 units. So next fall we'll be starting all 3 up again.
Yep.
I mean, I may be willing to do the teachers, but I would love to see what others' interests are, and we can definitely think about it. And Jill?
Yeah, can we wait until we have the full board here?
Absolutely. I just wanted to, and I noticed. I mean, I think we can definitely wait until the full board. But if anyone is like, yeah, I want to do it.
I sort of want to do it, but I'm worried about my time constraints. I think it would be fun though.
So if anybody wants to wait, I don't know if you come on, but you know, feel free to step forward if you.
I think Jill is stepping forward.
Yeah.
No, actually, I was just saying. I think the way that Emma was appointed after town meeting. I feel like we at one point sort of skipped over the formal assignment of her to a committee. So I was just going to echo what Jerry's saying, that I would be happy to do whatever I would be most useful at. I would definitely need some training. I have a pretty extensive knowledge about, you know, educator contracts, but I also don't want to just keep saying, oh, I'll serve on that if it's not going to be valuable. And I want to make sure that Emma and Aniket have a chance to formally be, you know, I think Aniket has, but I don't think Emma's been formally assigned to a committee, and there's a lot of good work to be done. So I'm happy to go wherever I'm needed, but I think maybe, like to Jerry's point, maybe when we get everybody back in.
Yeah, that's a good point about Emma. Emma and I have talked about committee assignments, but we have not formalized it yet. And I do want to say, Jill, that you are probably starting out well ahead of about 99% of board members who sit in their first negotiations. So if you're willing to do it, that would be fantastic. But we'll give you a little time, and I'll reach out to Aniket and Emma, and we'll maybe push this a little harder next meeting. All right. Anything else on that? Again, think about it, and we'll circle back to it next meeting and try to get Aniket and Emma's read. I think you know, all folks would be great, but Jill, we may pencil you in.
Especially because the Main Street Middle School Building Committee is indefinitely on hold, especially since we don't know what in-person learning will look like a year, 2, 3 from now. So
okay, so we will pencil in Andrew and Jill We will very lightly pencil in me, and we'll talk to Emma and Aniket, and if anyone else, and Jerry, sounds like you might have too. Yeah, so let's put those in pen in the next week or two after we talk to Emma and Aniket. Community values visioning proposal for Sue from Sue McCormick and Keisha Ram. Libby?
I put their proposal in the board packet, so you should have that. So I think it's just a matter of the board discussing if you want to move ahead with that direction or not, and to what extent, because I think she put in I have to admit that I haven't read it since she actually sent it to me, which was about 2 weeks ago. But I believe she had a couple of options in there. But I think you all you need to decide if you want to move forward with those two.
Yes, there was a 4-month and
yeah,
maybe 6 months or 12 month. I can't remember now.
I have to confess, I started reading it and then something came up and I put it down and I never read it.
Ooh, shame on you, Andrew.
I guess I didn't get a really good idea of what would be included. I didn't get a really good idea of what we would be responsible for versus what is included in the price. So I guess my feedback is I would want more information on roles and responsibilities, specifically what they would be doing, because some of it was unclear. I can write that up, Libby, and send you an email if that helps.
Yeah, that would be great, Jerry. I was just writing a note to myself, but that would be
okay. Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the kicker is we're kind of poised to have a really good, strong conversation. There's so much sort of momentum about the conversation and the pieces that they want to talk about. And we have, we have new leadership coming in. But I also want to be realistic about the challenges that COVID has presented. And I just don't know where that fits in here because it's not like we have money laying around. But it does seem like if there's some wave we can ride, that this would be a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I have to admit, I didn't totally understand the difference between the two contracts. Were they actually two things or like two phases of the same task?
I think it was one that was kind of the upfront, just community values kind of conversation to be able to formulate that and draw in. And I'm making assumptions here, so I'm not speaking for Susan or Keisha, so please don't think I am. But what I've seen them work through in the past, or at least work through in the past, is bringing community together and facilitating really hard conversations around what, and so we truly can name those values. That would be probably the first piece, and then the second piece is taking that deeper into where we're going as a district in terms of our school buildings. That I believe that's my understanding of it.
And were there, I mean, there's an estimated fee for phase one and an estimated fee for phase two. Are those two separate fees?
I think the phase two would be the add-on to the phase one.
Yeah. I had that same question. I was not clear about the price.
Yeah, so phase one is just under 15,000 and phase two looks like it's anywhere between 12 and 30.
So that would be in addition to the 15.
I think so. It's much longer work.
Yeah.
And to be clear, it's more expensive because we got a price from two very capable people. So these are two facilitators that are well known and respected throughout the state with this work and with lots of different types of work. So I recognize that they're not cheap, but I also recognize I've worked with Sue before, and I'm making an assumption about Keisha from reputation that they're pretty good at what they do. Susan is very good at what she does. So that's why the price tag's a little bit more than I had a little sticker shock on that too.
Yeah. what are thoughts, or do we need a little extra time to think about it? It seems like something.
Jim, I still, because if you read the bullets, and it's been a week since I read it, but it just wasn't clear to me what the board members would be responsible for versus what was included in the price. So my only concern was, if you read it one way and we're responsible for doing X, Y, and Z, I'm a little bit worried about capacity and our ability to take that on. And if you read it another way and they're doing it, well, great. You know that, and what do we need to do to support that? So I guess I just would like to better understand the work, since it is at Roxbury, and Ryan and I will be, I assume, pretty involved in that. So I just want to understand what will be expected.
So Jim, could I make the suggestion that read it through in the next week or so, or next couple of days, and board members can send me questions that I'll send to Susan and Keisha to get more clarity. Would that be a good step forward?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because it is relatively general. I think Jerry makes good points. I mean, I think we kind of understand from the meeting what we wanted, but I'm not sure it's totally reflected in this document.
Yep. So send me questions or points of clarity that you're looking for.
Okay. Thanks, Libby.
I'll be happy to share that with them.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So at 8:25, we are going to roll on into the safety guidelines for fall 2020 overview. Crystal clear, Libby?
Yeah, we got our plan all worked out. So I sent all of you the link for that. I'm assuming you all have had a chance to digest that, hopefully with a good stiff drink in your hand as well. It's going to be a pretty hard slough of the next 4 weeks or so, 4 to 6 weeks. I'm not going to go through all of the guidelines because you all have it. And if you haven't read it, then please do so. I can tell you that our administrators all took a vacation last week. One is still on vacation. He took a later one, so he's taking it this week. But we all came back today and had a 4-hour meeting today just to really dissect it. And in terms of what are the rules, what are the things that were clearly laid out for us that we have to follow, and even those are a little wishy-washy in other areas, and what are the real places that we need clarification from the AOE, and that list is pretty long as well, or where are the places that we have to have some really good conversation. What was abundantly clear is none of this is going to be easy, and we have a lot of work to do. We did start with creating a purpose statement that will go on all of our communications around this. And that is, I'm just reading it from our agenda this morning. In planning for the 2021 school year, all decisions will include our collective physical and social emotional needs as we continue to foster a rigorous, equitable, accessible, and flexible academic environment given these dynamic circumstances. So just that statement alone says where our heads are, and it also says the difficulty that we're going to face. So the first order of business I had, actually, my first meeting on Tuesday of this week was with Stacey Emerson in transportation, because some decisions need to be made sooner rather than later. And so next week, most likely, our families will be getting a survey just to say, these are the guidelines we're going to have to follow on the bus. Are you still in need? Are you going to be needing transportation for your students? With quite honestly, the hope of weeding some of the need out, so we can get a bigger clarity of how many kids are we transporting, because I think that's going to be different than in years past. And once we have those numbers, making our bus routes around that, and then having families commit to actually using our transportation. So in the past, it's been use it if you want to, it's available. But I believe this year we're going to have to, because of contact tracing, of capabilities, we're going to have families commit to transportation. That's not saying that if a family isn't needs help and needs to get their kid on a bus, a couple of days to get the kid to school, that's absolutely, we can do that. But we need some more solid numbers because of the responsibility around contact tracing. So that's coming out next week to families. I believe we agreed on weekly district communication to families as decision points are made, so that we're in constant communication across the summer. I know some families are antsy for decisions, and bottom line is these decisions are going to take time, and we need time to figure them out with our administration and our union and our nurses and all the people who are involved in this conversation. It's not going to be easy. That was made crystal clear to us this morning as we dug in together. So, I mean, that's kind of my update. I can go through that guidance and the main points for you, but I think you've all read them. And so I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability, or write the questions down and answer them when I can.
Yeah, no, I think at this time, given that it's 8:30, we haven't read them already. Any questions though for Libby? Jill?
Just really quick, I think I've asked this before too, is I'm wondering if we have any flexibility with staff to meet the needs. I'm thinking of the nurse at Roxbury, if temperature taking is still a part of it, or with the school length of time, if that is still in our contract very prescriptive for the time of day where people are coming and going, or if there is, in light of this, any flexibility with where staff are going or timing.
Mm-hmm. So there's two questions there. There's one about Roxbury and nursing. That may be a question that we will bring to the board to say we need to talk about this. We have not been able to hire a new point two nurse FTE at Roxbury yet. It's not to say we're not trying still, but we are. But we may need to increase that capacity or figure out a different way to do it through contracted services. I'm not even sure. I've kind of put the Montpelier nurses on that challenge because they know that world better than I do. I know there's been waivers asked for, and I don't know if we've gotten them yet from the state level to the feds, because I believe there's a school nursing license. And so I believe the state has asked for waivers around that so that just nurses could play this role. And I'm not sure if they've had that guidance. And actually the temperature checking and the health check, Roxbury is actually the easiest place for this to happen, even though we don't have a nurse, because each of their classrooms have an individual door. And so keeping kids socially distanced and entering the building, we actually probably won't need to stagger starts or anything at Roxbury because of the size of the building and just the way the building's set up, which is lovely. And the other question I heard you ask about was school day. Currently in the contract, the school day is from 7:30 to 3, and we have not talked with the union about any flexibility around that. We're not there yet in the conversation. So we believe the school day will happen within those hours. Whether students will be there for the full 8:30 to 3 as they should, or 8 to 8:30 to 3 as they usually are, is a different question. However, we believe we are going to try to work within those hours. And see, that's our starting point, but that could change in 3 weeks. We have not had that conversation with the union yet because we're not there.
Okay, I guess, and thank you, that helps. I had just had a parent asking about the late start setup for professional development and a lot of like the 3 and 4 day weekends. That was sort of surprised that those were still in there, at least at the middle school.
The state has alluded to, so when I say the state, Dan French has alluded to potentially changing school calendars from the state level in some way. We haven't gotten any more information on that other than him alluding to the possibility. So I'm kind of waiting on really looking at our calendar, and because I don't want to make decisions about the calendar and then have to go back on them because the state tells us to do something differently. And we don't have our Thursday meeting with Dan this week. It will start again next week. So that's a question I'm sure people will be asking to get more clarity on, because he's alluded to it in past meetings.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
I have a question going back to the SRO piece. Do you want to bring that back next board meeting or at a different date? I just want to know where it needs to fall in terms of gathering lots of data.
I think since it's summer and I think we can push it off for another couple board meetings to give you guys the time to.
It will be hard to get information from staff and students over the summer.
Yeah, I think getting that information's needed. So,
so Jim, let's talk about it when we talk about board agenda.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to know much more in 2 weeks than we know now.
In 2 weeks, could we have, so that we just keep things going and we don't peter out here and lose community confidence in any kind of process here, can we establish at our next board meeting a general timeline for all of this?
Sure.
Yeah, so that would be more of a board discussion. Yes, Andrew, is that what you're imagining?
Yeah, and I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on it, and I realize you're dealing with an unprecedented situation as an administration, and you're dealing with two crises essentially at the same time, and so I want to make sure that we give each of those situations the attention and focus that they deserve. I'm concerned that if we say, oh, we'll come back to this in several meetings from now, it's just going to kind of fall off, and then we'll get to it later on. And so obviously dealing with COVID-19 is front and center for your preparations, but in terms of getting us information to make a decision about an SRO and the role of an SRO, et cetera, I think we need to at the very least have a timeline established for what we're going to be doing, what information we're going to be collecting, that type of thing. I don't think we should push that off for over a month or two. That's my general thought.
So Jim and I are clear. It's the board having the discussion of creating that timeline, or would you like us to come with a timeline established? And Jim, maybe we can talk about that, but I just want to make sure that we're clear around.
Why don't we propose a timeline? I think we do want to inspire confidence that we are pushing this process forward because that's what we want to do. But I also think of meetings where we don't have all the information we need. That's not helpful either. So why don't we put together a timeline that's realistic, that's based on when you feel you can get the information you need from the city, from the police department, from students, from staff, et cetera, and then we'll propose that and put that out there and have some clear markers on how the process is going to look and why the timeline makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. We have one more agenda item, which is policy reading, first reading of the C28 transgender and gender nonconforming students. Do we have any, forgetting what the process is for reading? We just have discussion and it's a reading, right? Is there any other magical thing that needs to happen?
No, Jill point to suggestions and revisions and things.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
If you're asking if someone has to literally read it out loud, I don't think that has to happen because it's in the packet.
That I know, but is there something between reading out loud and any comments, suggestions, revisions, edits? I thought it was well done, and thank you, Ryan and policy team for putting it together. I know there were a couple of questions about, we reference a 2016 federal policy that is no longer in effect, and I think it might be worth noting that it's no longer in effect, even though the guidance there is instructive, and I think the direction we want to go. That's kind of the only comment I have.
Jim, I could follow up with that and say that I would propose, when this comes back for another reading, that we actually remove the footnotes entirely after, after we've had a chance to see where their references came from. It would be easier to maintain this as a living document without the footnotes, excuse me.
All right, I'm a big fan of no footnotes, so despite being a lawyer. That is good with me. Any objections to that?
No, that makes sense to me. I agree with Ryan that if you footnote everything, then you have to keep paying attention to what changes, and it's better to just keep the policy the policy.
Other edits, typos, general comments? Mara?
Libby, I had a quick question. We mentioned, and I think Ryan wrote about this in an email to you. We mentioned school activities, and I didn't know if sports are included under school activities or if we address sports in a different place.
Sports, yeah, I can look at this further, Mara. I could be talking out of turn because it's not my area of expertise. So I'm just going to premise this with that. But from my understanding, the rules about sports are a VPA matter. And VPA makes the rules on that piece. And I believe they've already ruled in favor of the LGBTQ plus.
Yeah. I mean, I help them write their policy.
Yeah,
so
yes. I think you have to go by VPA rules there, and I don't believe that you need it in your policy.
I think the question Jill, Ryan, and I had was, is there somewhere in our policy manual that would direct people to go to VPA if they were looking for? I just know that if I'm looking for sports policy, I'm like, policies, they're probably.
But I think it's a principals association.
Right? Oh my God.
Yeah.
The first time that I heard Vermont Principals Association did sports, I was like,
what? That's kind of all they do.
Different name for that thing. Yeah, but it's not intuitive, and I just didn't know if we had anywhere within our policy book that would direct people looking at sports questions to VPA for their policy pieces.
We do not have, well, we don't have a policy book. We have a binder and a Holta binder. On our policy page, on the board policy page, it doesn't mention sports in any way, shape, or form. I think those questions would probably go to Matt Link first, our athletic director. And Matt would either answer them or send people to the VPA. So I think people in our district can certainly point people that way. But if you're looking for it independently, you're probably going to struggle to find it. Unless you Google high school sports Vermont, you probably hit the VPA page.
But we might be able to put something on our policy webpage that indicates
like it could be something as simple as for any questions regarding sports policy, VPA.
Yeah, send them to I would assume that they're linked on their website. I haven't actually looked, but I would assume they're linked on their website. So we certainly could put that link on our policies page. Anna can probably do that in about 15 seconds. She's got her thumb up. She's ready to go.
Do we need anything else for the reading? Or can we consider it read?
Bring it back for the second reading next meeting.
Yep. Okay, without footnotes.
Thank you, guys.
I think next item is motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Jill.
Here.
Okay.
Aye.
Here, but not for long. Mara.
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye. Good night.
Good night, Jerry?
Aye.
I think that's it. At least it's enough. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye.
everyone.
Oh, I actually had a really quick question about records. Am I allowed to ask a question? We just adjourned. What do we do about the chat? Like, is Anna supposed to take a copy of that? Like, you can export it. I just didn't know if those things have to be counted as public record.
Anna, do you know that answer?
I don't know if there is an answer.
I don't. I've been thinking about that as a unit.
We could just export it to be
Yeah, if
safe.
there's a way to preserve it, we can.
Yeah, there's a couple questions that I think we want to ask the VSBA. Jim, I was asking Jim because it kind of made public comment continue
Yeah.
outside of the public comment space. And I don't know if that's right, if that's wrong, if that's okay, if it's not okay. So I think that might be a question for the VSBA.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing. Maybe for tonight, Anna, if you can just export it so we've got it somewhere in the world. And then it's like Zoom is notoriously hard to save the chat on. It's like really dumb.
This isn't kind of readable.
Yeah. So there is an export function like in the settings and
Yeah,
stuff.
you got that, yeah.
Yeah.
But as main host, Libby, you'll need to do that. I don't have that feature.
Yeah, no, that's a good question though, because it's somewhere between continuous public comment and chatter sometimes we'll get on email during a meeting from. I think the difference is that everyone in the meeting can see the comments and respond to them, so it becomes
like a dialogue that's happening.
Yeah, it becomes the dialogue,
which goes into public comment. Yeah, I think it's a question for the VSBA.
Okay, great. We'll get on that.
Yeah, we'll follow that up.
Thanks.
All right.
Anna, you just go to the bottom right and hit save chat, I think.
Yeah, I did it.
All right. Yeah. Thanks all.
All right. Take care.
And I got it. I'll send it to you.
Great, thank you.
And let's remember to ask the VSBA tomorrow about the chat. Because I think you can shut it off if we need to, but I don't know what the rules are. All right.
Yeah, we're responsive too in the morning. Thank you.
All right. See ya.
See ya.